Donald Trump has suggested on several occasions that he plans on scrapping the nuclear deal that the United States made with Iran. Of course, this has to do with Iran enriching uranium and how a deal was struck during the Obama administration between the US and Iran to kind of scrap that enrichment program. Now, Donald Trump and Republicans haven't liked that program. They believe that the US has received the short end of the stick. In fact, here's Trump explaining just that in the next video.
I don't think Iran is in compliance. We wrote them a very tough letter to the, as you know, to the Congress. I personally don't think they're in compliance, but we have time. And we're going to see. We also put down a lot of defaults or potential default situations. I don't think they're living up to the spirit of the agreement. I think it's a horrible agreement, but they are not in compliance with the agreement, and they are certainly not in the spirit of the agreement in compliance. And I think you'll see some very strong things taking place if they don't get themselves in compliance.
Okay, so they are in compliance. That's according to the UN's nuclear watchdog, which is obviously keeping an eye on this. And I never understood why Republicans have been against this. Is it because they want to invade Iran? Like, do they want another war? Is that what they're calling for? Because they did exactly what we asked them to do. They've been doing exactly what we asked them to do. So let me give you the details. First of all, keep in mind that the US has just extended sanctions relief for Iran as part of the 2015 nuclear agreement, which Trump has described as the worst deal ever, okay? So we imposed sanctions on Iran because of the fact that they were enriching uranium. Then we came to a deal where they would stop enriching uranium for nuclear purposes, and we would get to do all sorts of things like constantly check in on them and make sure that they're not hiding an enrichment program that we're unaware of. The next major deadline comes in October when Trump will decide whether to certify that Iran is complying with the agreement known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. If he does not, Congress has 60 days to decide whether to reimpose sanctions waived under the deal. Now, under this Iran deal, just to give you some details and let you know just how invasive it is for Iran, and again, they are complying, Iran is required to provide inspectors from the UN's nuclear watchdog access to monitor its declared nuclear facilities. Every 90 days, the US president must certify to Congress that Iran is keeping up its end of the deal. And again, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN's nuclear watchdog, says Iran is complying with its commitments under the deal, including inspections. What is the issue? Why do we keep going back to criticizing the Iran nuclear deal? I mean, if you want to invade it and you want to go to war, then I can see why you don't like it. But if they're complying and they're not enriching their uranium for nuclear use, then what is the issue? Well,
the issue was that it happened beforehand, before this deal ever started.
He just hates everything that Obama has done.
Right, it's Obama and Netanyahu, in order to have his friendship from the very beginning, has said this is a bad deal. He said it all throughout Latin America leading up to this United Nations General Assembly. He will say it again. He does not like the deal. He doesn't like the fact that he thinks
that we're not fighting his war. Is that what?
No, it's not. No, he doesn't like the fact. Well, he thinks that it imperils Israel's security, which you have to give him credit for saying. If you're the president of a country, you want your country to be secure. But his reasoning for saying that is, okay, once it expires, that Iran can go out and make more nuclear warheads, and it doesn't go on in perpetuity. Which, fine, but every deal is like that, right?
Right.
And the point is that if they're not doing it and they're becoming part of the world community and things are going to go in a proper direction, that wouldn't be something they want. It's a deal for Iran too. They're getting something for it. They're not just giving it up for nothing. And the other part of this that's so absurd when you hear Trump say these things, he can't just end it. This is the P5+1. There are other countries involved in this. This is a 6-nation endeavor. So because he loves Netanyahu, because Netanyahu loves Kushner, and because Trump wants to do everything, like Mark just said, that is against what Obama did from start to finish. That's his motivation here. It all goes back to being made fun of, if you ask me, and I've said it before, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner and being mocked. He didn't like that. And so everything he's done in the White House has been motivated in a little way by that. there's no question that he can't do this on his own. But he does have Netanyahu in his corner, and Netanyahu's being vocal, and they don't want it because Israel thinks that it's a danger to them.
Real quick, the reason why Iran agreed to this nuclear deal was because the sanctions that we imposed were crippling them, right? And so they were so desperate to lift those sanctions that they agreed to this deal. And so if the fear is, okay, well, what happens when the time limit of this deal runs out? Then you impose sanctions if they start enriching uranium again. You know what I'm saying? Like, why is that so difficult? Like, Netanyahu's response or his perspective is like, let's go get them. But no,
but Iran continues to fund Hezbollah. So
I think
that's also part of making a deal with Iran for Netanyahu, who is a black and white person.
Right.
Yeah, that's insufferable, which makes him insufferable.
If you're Israel, your view of Iran is different. We're not Israel.
Right.
That's right.
We are the USA, and we're dealing with a president who clearly, if he sees Obama's fingerprints on anything, wants no part of it, and he wants to undo it. And there's something else going on here that you'll recognize as familiar, and that is that Trump rhetoric, which got him such attention on the stump, that this is a lousy deal. This Iran deal is awful. This is the Obamacare is a terrible, terrible deal. It's terrible legislation. I can't believe it. Exactly. Anna's right. He has no idea what this Iran deal is. If he had watched a few episodes of TYT, he'd know more than he does now because we broke it down for you. But Anna's right. They're so motivated, Iran, to stay on the straight and narrow as far as this goes because the economic sanctions were tough. Sanctions do work. This is a great example of that fact. And so I don't understand. I understand the tough rhetoric because that's all he does. And that appeals to his base and all of that crap. But you're right. This sort of, it borders on saber rattling that he does. I think he feels empowered by it in the moment, but the damage is significant. And in this case, it has the additional virtue of not bearing any relationship to what's going on. As you say, Iran actually is already following this deal.
That's right. And so if Trump matched his tough talk with details of what he believes is bad about this deal, then maybe I'll be a little more receptive to it, right? But it doesn't even seem like he knows what the deal entails. He's never specific about it. All he does is tear it apart and say that it's a bad deal. But bad deal for whom? Like, we're getting exactly what we want, which is Iran stopping their nuclear program. So what more do you want? And again, look, his rhetoric has real ramifications because the way he's handled North Korea so far, has led to fears that things are going to escalate, things are going to get bad with North Korea. We could potentially engage in some sort of nuclear war with North Korea. And the fact that he is handling Iran in a similar fashion after they've complied with us is discouraging, and it makes me worry about what the future holds because we can't get involved in another war.
They had a president, Iran, who was sort of a Donald Trump-ish character.
Ahmadinejad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Ahmadinejad would go on with this stuff, Israel should be driven into the sea and all the Jews with it and all of this kind of thing. And he had very tough talk toward America as well. And what we did was we sort of realized after a while that we could compartmentalize him, that he wasn't recognized by the people of Iran, certainly, as the guy who really knew what he was talking about. And even by the government of Iran, he was sort of this guy who was sort of like the drunk uncle on Thanksgiving. So I'm wondering if Trump can't also find his way to that place, at least in terms of the international rhetoric, the way it's perceived.
But foreign nations can't impact the way we think as much here as we did in Iran in terms of appealing to the moderates there. Although, I would think that the foreign ridicule would resonate with some people here, but it doesn't. So I don't know. It would be great because the analogy is strong, but I don't see it happening here in the same way that it happened there. And you're right, though. I mean, that's something to remember is that they got a new leader and Netanyahu and the way that Israel looks at that. Now, you make a good point. I mean, we are different than Israel. Israel does have their very, very legitimate reasons for not trusting anything that Iran does at any time. We, on the other hand, are different. We are the ones that are looking over all of these inspections, who are part and parcel of why it happened. And I think that's the best point of this panel is the one you made, Mark, because we have to look at this totally differently and can't be pawns. They love to control the way we think, other leaders. And with Trump, Russia's able to do it, Israel's able to do it, and let's keep watching.
Right, and also just keep in mind that Trump claimed that he was all about America first, right? This non-interventionist foreign policy idea that he hasn't followed through on at all. In fact, he escalated drone strikes in the Middle East. He escalated not just Bush-era policies, but Obama-era policies in regard to what's going on in the Middle East. We're fighting Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen. I mean, how many of our resources are we going to go ahead and utilize for wars that we shouldn't be involved in? And that's what I'm concerned about here, right? I get it. Israel has legitimate concerns. We're not Israel. Right now, Iran is following through with their portion of the deal. And I don't know what Trump is going to plan on doing in October when that decision needs to be made. But I do want to hear from Hassan Rouhani, who is the president of Iran, during an interview. Here's what he had to say about the potential of the US reneging on the Iran nuclear deal.
We are against any type of weapons of mass destruction as well as nuclear weapons, and we believe that they must be destroyed throughout the world. So our opinion, our positions are clear. Arms races are not acceptable to us in any region, and we see that as extremely dangerous.
Let's go to graphic 13. He also said exiting such an agreement would carry a high cost for the United States of America, and I do not believe Americans would be willing to pay such a high cost for something that will be useless for them. So, I mean, I agree, like pulling out would be useless. I think that it would be counterproductive.
He made a great point too in regards to North Korea. He talked a little later about North Korea, and he said, listen, if the world sees that the United States does this with a deal, as they're doing, threatening to do with Iran, why would North Korea sit down with them? Why would any country, why would Syria and Myanmar, why would these countries get into deals with the United States if all they're gonna do is turn around and renege once you're complying with it?
Sure, and we're already seen that way. This just in. America guarantees your security. We go in with troops, and then what happens? When the going gets rough and we've milked the situation for as much as we can, we pull out. And we're viewed widely that way. I mean, we've let down countries all across the world. Now, I would argue we shouldn't have been there to begin with, but that's a totally different conversation. But my point is simply in terms of the way America's perceived, Michael's right, this agreement could be seen in the same way that future agreements can be seen, which is as worthless. And by the way, it can work the other way. Sure, we'll agree to something with the United States because we know you guys aren't serious about it, and we don't need to be serious about it either. Oh, that was the last guy. Yeah, we don't have any intention of following through on this agreement. So it's bad business policy. And if Trump were really a businessman, and we know he's not, he's just a brand, and he's just a tough-talking, vacuous dude who's managed to skate his way into office. If he were really a businessman, he'd know the value of following through on these contracts. It makes no sense on any level.
Support independent media. Come join us at the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.